A lot of them self-identify after they finish a program with us as a diver, not as somebody with a disability, which is really important as they move through life. Now if I can dive, I can do anything.
Someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
People often ask me if I think enough is being done to support our veterans. And while it's a very complicated question with many variables, I truly believe that there are so many programs available to those in need, and not just veterans. Unfortunately, they just don't always know where to look. In this episode, I have the privilege to talk with the leaders of Diveheart, a nonprofit organization that helps people with disabilities through scuba-related activities. So, I'd like to welcome the president and founder, Jim Elliott, and the executive director, Tinamarie Hernandez, to the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast. Welcome both of you, and thank you for the work you both do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us speak to you and your listeners today.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to learn a little bit more about each of you and your background. Could you share a bit about where you come from and what got you both involved with Diveheart?
So I met Jim about 12 years ago, and I heard about what he was doing for the community and for people with disabilities, and coming from a family with people who have disabilities and other challenges, I thought this would be great. And I really was interested in learning how to scuba dive. I was not a scuba diver at the time. So I was lucky enough that they were locationally desirable. They were only 5 miles from where I lived. And I was able to start volunteering and just got more and more involved as the years went through. So now I get to be their executive director. And it is a role that pays my heart, is what I tell people.
My background is my father was a disabled Army veteran. So I grew up dodging wheelchairs at the VA hospital when I was a little kid. And so I grew up helping people with disabilities because of that. And then raised children with disabilities. My eldest daughter's blind. I got involved in the 80s in a blind ski group where I guided and taught blind skiers. And I saw that change a lot of lives. And I said, well, if skiing can change lives like this, I can imagine what diving can do. I was a journalism major in college, and I took diving just as another arrow in my quiver as a journalist in case I met someone like Jacques Cousteau. So I learned to dive, and I fell in love with it right away. But then, you raise a family, and I got to dive once in a while, but then became an instructor in 97 and started teaching people with disabilities full time, and looked around and didn't see anybody else out there really doing it at the time. And in 2001, I incorporated Diveheart as a nonprofit to help children and veterans and others with disabilities. And the beauty of Diveheart is that this is something that is a great equalizer. So a veteran in a wheelchair can go diving with his child who has autism or cerebral palsy, and they're both in the water equal, diving with whatever abilities they have. So that's the beauty of it. Plus, it took me the most part of 3 days to get a blind person acclimated to the skis and following commands and stuff like that. But in 30 minutes, I could get a veteran out of a wheelchair, get him standing up underwater, and he looks down and he goes, oh my God, I'm standing up for the first time since my injury. And that is a high for me. But 30 minutes versus 3 days, it's a quick turnaround. And so we work with the Wounded Warrior Project, different groups, veterans hospitals. I've trained at Camp Pendleton, Fort Knox, Fort McCoy, Great Lakes Naval Base. So we've done a lot with veterans over the years.
That's awesome. I want to dig more into Diveheart and what it's all about. I mean, you've been able to make diving accessible to so many different groups of people. How do you go about incorporating people with disabilities underwater?
Well, the first thing we do is we do a lot of things like this. Get the word out that it's a possibility. When someone is born with a disability, or if they get injured, or they're coming back, like our veterans, and trying to enter into the world, back on the civilian side, people don't come up to them necessarily and go, hey, did you ever think about diving? Did you think about the properties and the ways that it would help maybe with your pain, or help clear your head, or just benefit you body, mind, and spirit. We're working hard to have that happen more often, but a lot of times it doesn't still. So we do a lot of things to do outreach and education and let people know there's a possibility. And then once we get people interested, the first place we take them are the pools. And that's where the communities come in. People all over the country, if they're able and willing to find people of like mind that want to help people in their community, that's where the big heavy lifting, Jim usually says, happens in pools, where we're able to introduce people to scuba diving. And then if they get even more excited, we offer trips. And trips are both for the people who volunteer to assist people in the water, as well as our adaptive divers who might go for the first time. And, they're like, I've had people be like, I haven't needed my passport in a while. Now I get to use that. So it's just an exciting way of us going down the path, and everything is challenged by choice. So, they can come and just do pool programs monthly or however many times we have them. And that's absolutely free for them. And that's where we're so thankful for all of the buddies and the volunteers who help us, because we couldn't do these programs without them.
Yeah, I think the powerful thing about being underwater is, and this is kind of funny, the first time you put your face in the water and you breathe off of a regulator, it kind of messes with your head a little bit. And we have some people that, what I have people do is, if they're able to stand up, they stand up and just put their face down in the water and take a breath. And a lot of times they'll come back out, and some people go, I can't do this. And I just laugh and I go, your brain's saying, what the heck are you doing? You're not supposed to be breathing underwater. So it's kind of counterintuitive. Once you get past the fact that you're breathing underwater, then when we get people neutrally buoyant and they can, again, stand up out of their wheelchair, for example, and move around underwater independently, that's what I love to do, is get them independent so that they can, have new confidence and self-esteem. So a lot of them self-identify after they finish a program with us as a diver, not as somebody with a disability, which is really important as they move through life. Now if I can dive, I can do anything. And we take our trips are not for the sake of doing trips. We try to get our instructors and our dive buddies experience. And the only way you really do that is being on, in the water somewhere, whether you're in a pool or whether you're on a trip. We love to go to Cozumel, Mexico, because number one, it's cheaper than Florida, and it's, the current is amazing. The current will move you through the water, and now I don't have to hold on to your tank valve and drive you around, right? Now the current, once we get you independent and use your breathing to control your buoyancy, your up and down movement, the current just moves you along, and we're your buddies. We swim with you, and all the volunteers. It's kind of like a church mission trip where you have to, cover your expenses to get there, and we negotiate the best price we can for the trip, for lodging and for diving, and then, but you're paying that, and then guess what? You get to work your butt off all week. So it's a lot like putting a roof on a house in Ecuador for a school or something, where it's selfless work, and it's hard sometimes, but it's very rewarding.
I love that. And you've touched a little bit on this, but would you mind expanding a little bit on how scuba can help with things like pain and mental injuries, especially for the veteran community?
Yeah, so there have been some preliminary research, some studies, and then tons and tons of anecdotal evidence that diving really assists with what I had said before, body, mind, and spirit. So for veterans with PTSD and others with PTSD, what one research study found is that 80% of symptoms were alleviated during the week of diving that these veterans were on and being studied, which is amazing. And we've had people tell us that euphoria not just helps with clearing their mind, but also with the pain. And if someone's in chronic pain, so many times they've come up to Jim or myself and say, I'm pain-free and I can't tell you for how long. And in many cases, it lasts past the dive week, which is wonderful. And that's why we want to do more studies and get more things, because well, you say it right in the TED Talk. Could you imagine someone who could use diving as part of their pain management regimen? Maybe you take less of the medications that you're taking now, or maybe you don't have to take the medication. If you're going to go on a dive trip and be gone for the week, this week I can lower that or not have to take as much and just feel that freedom from a lot of different things.
Yeah, one of our goals is to build a deep warm water therapy pool where we can replicate the benefits of open water in a confined, safe environment that's warm. So people with thermoregulation issues don't have to worry about cold. You don't have to worry about visibility because you're in a pool. You don't have to worry about weather. So there's all these factors that we take out of the equation. And now we're able to get thousands of people in the water versus, hundreds in a year. So we're very excited about that. And the type of research we're looking at doing there with organizations like Mayo Clinic, who we were just with 2 weeks ago in Cozumel, presenting to their doctors and diving with them and talking about the benefits of hyperbaric medicine and things like that. And one of the studies they want to do with us is to basically take individuals with disabilities in shallow water and breathe enriched air, which is we're breathing 21% oxygen, and we could up that to 100% O2 at safe depths. And now you do range of motion, and the therapist or the doctor does whatever kind of research they're going to do, but they get to see what the benefits are of 100% oxygen while they're doing these other things and while they're experiencing zero gravity, and they're no longer sedentary in their wheelchair. Now there's circulation and vascular benefits. We've even had veterans tell us that who are in medical school tell us that it helps with their bladder integrity. If you're a diver, there's pressure, ambient pressure. As you go down, it increases. So every 33 feet is another atmosphere. So pressure from the surface, where we are now, down to 33 feet, actually doubles in pressure. So that's pressure on your bladder. And we have a joke that we tell in diving. It's like, if you're a wetsuit diver, there's divers that pee in their wetsuit, and there's those that lie about it. But basically, when divers either pee in their wetsuit or they wait till they get out. And if you have to cath, for example, and you have a catheter that you have to use as soon as you get out of that water, you need to cath because the pressure puts that need, and because you have a spinal cord injury, for example, your brain doesn't get that same message the way we do, but your body, you begin to get something called, if you're susceptible to autonomic dysreflexia, it's where you get a noxious stimulus. If you broke a toe, for example, and you couldn't feel it, it would still send a signal to your brain, and it would come up garbled, but it would create an anxiety in your brain that would raise your blood pressure, and you potentially could stroke out and die. So we got to always keep an eye on that. And but the benefits of zero gravity are amazing, and just being free. And freedom is a word that people with disabilities use all the time.
And I think that there's so many other aspects to the program. So for some reason, there's this special bond that everyone gets. I think it might be that we're all on life support when we're underwater, right? But looking out for each other, this feeling of community. I've mentioned in other places that, what I think some veterans really like about it is diving is mission driven, right? You have a mission. You go down, you talk about the things that you might want to see, the things that you need to do. There's, first we check this, we have our pre-dive check, then we do our dive, then we come out and we do a post, debrief afterwards. How did everything go? Did we follow all the things that we said we were going to do? That type of thing. And I think that is really good. And I love that we have veterans who come as our volunteers to assist others in the water. And then our veterans who come as adaptive divers. They might have been divers before, they might be new to diving, but it gives them a way to work with their brothers and sisters again in a very special way. And that always makes me happy.
And we're really big. My background's media, and we're really big on stories. We believe stories stick, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, and a video or a news story is worth more than that. So what we've tried to do is create an environment on our YouTube channel that reflects what we do with veterans. So if you went to click on playlist, you'd have all of our military stories that are on video, at least, in one place. So you could see a documentary, or you could see a testimonial from a Navy veteran who has ALS, or you could see something from Marine corpsmen, and combat Marines that are helping his buddies who say, you got to be here and try this, man. It changes lives. And it does. We have a real current diver profile where a Marine corpsman was very hesitant about getting involved as a buddy. He just wanted to be a tourist. He just wanted to be on the boat pleasure diving. And he just says, this changed my mind. I'm now going to become a buddy certified through Diveheart and help my brothers and sisters, who need me. And it's really powerful. It's all in one place. It's easy to share. So if you know someone who's struggling with depression, or someone who's in pain, chronic pain, or someone who just needs to hear, a story of hope and healing, to feel better about where they are in life, it's share this playlist with them, and you'll get a lot of that. There's some stories that are challenging to watch for veterans. I got to be honest with you. CNN came and did a piece on us when we took Gold Star families. It's going to get me.
We took Gold Star families and we paired them with our veterans who had come back injured. And so both were going through loss, going through change, going through the new normal, and they were able to learn how to scuba dive together. And then we took them on a trip, and they got to experience the trip together, assisting one another, supporting one another. And many times it was the first time that the families or the veterans were back in that type of community. And it was a wonderful trip, a beautiful experience. But to watch it on video, to see the stories unfold, it gets a little bit emotional for people.
Yes, but especially obviously the Gold Star parents when they talk about some of their losses, and it's challenging. I used to play the video when I was doing training with veterans, and in one particular session, some had to get up and walk out, and I just said, we'll leave this off to the side and let them watch it if they want to watch it at all, because it is heart-wrenching, but most are inspiring.
And these stories can be so impactful to get people motivated and get involved and honestly start becoming part of an active community again. For myself, living out in a tropical location surrounded by the ocean, I'm kind of ashamed to admit that I don't spend a ton of time in the water, and I'm actually afraid of scuba, even though so much of it makes sense on why it would be so healing. I mean, the focused breathing, the ability to freely float without the weight of my body causing further injury to my own back. And then the camaraderie that's built under the water through hand signals and storytelling, and just the full day of diving that my friends tell me about. What's been your experience with veterans coming out of the water for their first time experiencing scuba?
Well, I can relate to one story. It comes to mind right away, where we had a veteran who had part of his face had been damaged by a grenade, and he did not come out of the house. He came out of the house to get in the pool with us for the first time since his injury, and his wife was sitting. It was in Phoenix, actually, on a bench near the pool, and honest to God, we had to almost drag this guy out of the water. He almost breathed all the air out of the tank completely. He didn't want to come out. And his wife was in tears on the side of the pool saying, oh my God, this is so good for him, because he was afraid to come out of the house and didn't want to. And this is something now that he can do. We can, we've thought about working with burn victims that can come out after they're able to get in the water, because obviously we're cognizant of infection and things like that. We don't want to do that. The thing that's really cool about scuba, and what you kind of touched on, which brought to mind, you're afraid, you said, of getting in trying scuba. A lot of people have bad experiences with water. Uncle Louie threw me in the water when I was a kid to learn to swim. Well, you don't do it. You don't throw them in 15 feet of water and go, okay, swim. And they're traumatized. They have PTSD to some extent from those events. Or, you watch Jaws, thank you, Steven Spielberg. And now if you're in the ocean, you're afraid because you think Jaws is going to get you and stuff. So the thing that makes scuba cool for people with disabilities is so many people have those issues and they're afraid to try scuba. So when somebody rolls up, it's like, well, what'd you do this weekend? Well, I was diving. It's like, what? How do you do that? I'm afraid to do that. So the cool factor is really off the charts. And really it's, I tell people it's not about scuba diving. This is about creating a paradigm shift in the individual. So now it's not Johnny in a wheelchair, it's Johnny the scuba diver. And now he can go on and take on other challenges. And what that does is when other people around him in his community and his family and his neighborhood and his workplace, they see this happen, they see this transformation, and there's a ripple effect, right?
It is. There's a ripple effect. There's people that talk and they're like, I'm seeing you, who I have a certain thought about, like what your abilities are. When I tell people a lot, if you're at a cocktail party and someone's in a wheelchair and they come up to you and, you have a certain idea of what they can accomplish or what they do or what their day's like possibly, even if you don't consciously think about it. And then when you hear that they're a scuba diver, that whole thing gets tossed out the window and they have to recalibrate. And that happens with the individual as well. And it happens with their family. We've had families who, none of them had been in out of the country, or none of them had really tried certain things. And once this person and their family started diving, not only was the world open for them, but it opened for the family. And, now we're getting pictures of them on their own trip in Cozumel, down with the people we've trained to dive. And they're like, hey, we're here. We're having a good family vacation. And that's what it's all about. Or they go and they're traveling with their friends and they're able to do things. What I would tell you is that we have amazing, amazing instructors who would work with you and work through some of the fears that you have, and just be the thing that we do is because of the organization we are and because of the training that we give our instructors, the people who get involved with us as instructors aren't about, I need you in a class of 4, I need you to do this. They can work with you individually. And this is out of their hearts that they do this, not because we demand anything of them, but they're the type of people who are like, okay, let's, figure out how do we overcome those challenges that you have if you really want to do, experience diving. We had a mom who her husband and her son were divers with us. And every time they came on a trip or went, she's like, yeah, you guys go. I'm not a diver. And she came on a trip as a guest and she saw one of our divers coming out of the water and had this smile on her face and just was so excited. And the mom goes back home, doesn't tell her husband, doesn't tell her son. She goes to the dive shop and she says, can you give me another Discover Scuba? And he says, okay, what are you thinking? She goes, I just want to make sure I don't like it. And he's like, all right, whatever you say. But she ended up liking it. And she's now a diver. She doesn't dive with us all the time, but it's so wonderful to see her be able to experience this now with her family.
Yeah, we also use tools to allow people who would never get a chance to get in the water or breathe off a traditional scuba an opportunity to do this. We started using full face masks with communications, primarily because I mentioned that I was involved in blind skiing. I thought, how can we make this experience better for someone who's visually impaired or blind? And I thought, well, we'll put a full face mask on them with communications. And now we can put their hands on something and then we can narrate to them. So tell them a story about the wreck that went down or what they're touching and things that are safe to touch much, that is. So we employed the full face mask first for the blind, but then we started using it for, like, this veteran who part of his face was taken away by a grenade blast. We would take surgical tubing and put it inside the skirt lining of the mask so that it would conform to his face. So we've improvised ways of getting people in the water who would never have a chance to do that. We kind of introduced diving with cognitive impairments. The dive industry didn't want anything to do with it. Autism and Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and traumatic brain injuries. They ran away from that stuff. They wanted to deal with the guy with one leg. They wanted the easy stuff. And, it's not, I'm not saying that only having one leg is easy, but I'm saying when we work with individuals with disabilities, there's kind of different tiers of difficulty. And there are a lot of people that present themselves as tabbies, we call them. That's temporarily able-bodied individuals, which we all are, right? Because some eventually is going to take us down. So if you present as a tabby, but you have a disability, a lot of veterans, for example, have PTSD and mild traumatic brain injuries, and you wouldn't know when they walk into a room they have anything going on. But there are triggers and things that we have to let the boat crew know about. We have to let the resort know about. It's like or a kid with autism. It's like, let the dive masters know when you give a command or ask this kid to do something. If he doesn't respond right away, there's a reason, and you have to understand. So we try to train at resorts and at dive operations so that they're more empathetic when they're working with individuals of different abilities.
And from what I've seen, Diveheart brings scuba accessibility to so many people, and the fact that you help build empathy in individuals that wouldn't necessarily work with these divers is also an incredible feat that you do. I know that some of the stories that I was just astounded by was some of the people that you worked with. One gentleman needed a respirator to breathe, and you found a way. It just seems like whatever challenge you're presented with for scuba, your team is working to find a solution for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what a blessing we have in that there are so many people out there in the world that, Jim is a master at putting out, hey, we need help in this, and finding the people that can help us and finding the people that are willing to help us, because that custom wetsuit, a wetsuit company stepped forward and said, we'll create the custom wetsuit. And so many times, we partner with manufacturers who say, let us know what you're in need and we'll help. And they've come through for us every time.
Yeah, that's kind of the thrill for me is taking on challenges that have not been taken on before. And getting Matt Johnson on a ventilator in the water, he could only go down as deep as his ventilator hose would go, and his ventilator had to sit up on the side of the pool. But it gave me the idea that, well, why couldn't we take someone, if we could take two ventilators and put them in like an underwater camera housing with a switch. If one failed, we could go to the other one and abort the dive safely. Why can't we do that? So we went to Northwestern University engineering students and had one of our MacGyver guys kind of be the lead there. And he worked with them for several years. We were trying to figure out a way to get, at the time, Lenny Larson was also on a ventilator. He was out in Los Angeles. And this guy was the coach for Greg Louganis, the springboard diver, the Olympian diver. And he himself, Lenny, was on a trampoline and did a flip wrong, landed on his head and became a C3 quadriplegic. So he needed a ventilator to breathe for him. But he was a dive master prior to his injury, so he could swallow and equalize his airspace, where a lot of times people have to block their nose and blow to equalize their airspace, because airspaces have to be equalized as you go down as pressure increases, right? A lot of people have swam to the bottom of a swimming pool and felt pressure on their ears, because they're not equalizing if they feel that pressure. So that's kind of what he could do. He could swallow. So we got really excited about figuring out a way to strap this underwater camera housing with the ventilators in it and scuba tanks attached and get him to be able to go to 100 feet if he wanted to, rather than just only as far as his ventilator hose would go. And we really were moving forward in that that realm. And unfortunately, Lenny passed away just in the last year, but that's still an idea that we want to investigate and continue to grow. And with this facility we want to build, we feel there'll be a lot of opportunities to do really cutting edge research, rehabilitation. And the thing we want to do is make it the first 20 feet, for example, above grade. So it'd be glass. So it'd be like you'd be able to watch your loved ones do whatever therapy they were doing and be part of that environment and healing.
That's absolutely incredible. And, it leads me back to the opening point, is that there are so many organizations out there in the world that are trying to do good things and solve problems to help others. And Diveheart seems to be one of those. And so how can people go about either becoming a volunteer or just trying their hand at scuba for the first time?
Well, the first thing is info@diveheart.org. Email us. There's a phone number on our website. Jim answers that phone. Everyone's always shocked, but he answers that phone number, and then he'll be the guy who says, well, you need to talk to so-and-so, or I'm going to, send you an email and you can talk to this other person who can, who's the person in charge of helping you in this thing. But we try to be we're a small but mighty group. And we have also spun off a number of nonprofits who do this type of work. And if we're not in your immediate vicinity, we try really hard to find someone who is. If there's a program, even if it's not our Diveheart specific related, we'll put you in the right direction so that you can get this experience.
Every market we start a new program in, we try to make it a community effort. So I'm a Rotarian, I've been a Lion, a Shriner over the years, and I work with service organizations, work with rehab hospitals, work with VAs, and we were just on an active military joint forces base in Southern California this last week where we were going to be training. The pool broke, so we didn't get a chance to do that. But the nice thing is we were working with the American Legion, and we were working with a yacht club that they're affiliated with, and they had their own scuba program. I think they're the largest American Legion in the world, I believe. And they have they want to train people up, and they're actually going to, because we couldn't train there last week, they're going to come with us to Cozumel, Mexico. And what I try to do is when someone first comes to us, if they don't have anyone in their area that could help them directly, we try to figure out a way that the community can come together and help. Maybe a Rotary Club can help sponsor to get you to a market where you can be trained, and then maybe help you sponsor you on a trip or something like that. So we try to work with people in their community that could help them as well, and that's good for everybody. When you give, you receive indirectly. In so many different ways, and we've seen that happen over and over and over again around the world. Actually, we thought we were going to be a little club type thing with like the blind skiers years ago. We thought we were going to go in the pool and we would go in the quarry in the summer once in a while. We might do a trip to Florida or something once a year. And now in 2020, when COVID hit, we canceled 14 trips, 7 out of the country, and 200 pool programs around the U.S. And that's just the U.S. And I'll be in Malaysia 2 weeks this year, training in Borneo and instructors from around the world. So we've grown and changed the entire dive industry. And this is our 22nd year, and we're very, very proud of that. And it's primarily done with volunteers. I'm a volunteer. I work 7 days a week. I don't draw a salary, but we do a lot with a little.
It's absolutely incredible. And I really appreciate your service to those with disabilities, and getting them involved in scuba, leading to their healing and recovery, and also just pushing research in this area even further. So kudos to you and your organization. And before I let you go, I would love to ask, is there a message that you would like to deliver to somebody that's currently going through a struggle?
Yeah, I think that there are individuals that are sometimes hesitant to try this. And I think that I use our stories to help bring them along. And I think that if we can encourage or get someone who's challenged in some way, shape, or form, with depression or with anger or anxiety or whatever, have them watch some of our stories of hope and healing, either on YouTube on our playlists, or if you click on media on diveheart.org, you can go to our media kit, and the media kit has some of our best stuff, but also we have a lot of magazine stories and news stories that you won't see on YouTube because that's obviously only video, right? So I would, sharing stories is a great way to address a whole variety of needs out there in individuals with not just physical disabilities, but with cognitive and emotional challenges.
I think mine would be, don't give up. Let us see if there's a way for us to help you and fill, whatever. Let us see if we can help. That I feel like there's so many people in our organization that want to, and hopefully we could find someone that can connect with you. And whether you become a diver or not is not the point. It's about feeling welcomed, having a purpose. Knowing that people care and want you to get through what you're getting through. And so I feel like there's so many people in our organization that do that well and are genuine in their feelings for wanting to be helpful in that way.
And our mantra is challenge by choice. So, we're not pushing people into areas they don't want to go. When we train instructors, we do beat them up a little bit, but it is challenge by choice as well with them. But we really believe that everyone needs to be loved. Everyone needs to feel valued. And like Tinamarie said, everyone needs to have a purpose. And we try to, get that all across in our training, whether you have a disability or not.
Well, Jim, Tinamarie, thank you both so much for coming on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast. It's been a pleasure learning about you and all that Diveheart's doing.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all the veterans out there. We can't send you enough love and appreciation.